In episode 81, you met my Monster Fest friends as we recapped the 2024 event. On this episode, Marcele is back to share fascinating stories of Italian folk magic and intergenerational attachments. Welcome to the Peep Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Maroc, and I'm grateful you're here. The two big ideas behind the Peep Podcast are to show that the paranormal is more normal than most people think, and to connect the science to the psi, including ESP, psychokinesis, and intuition. In this episode, we're talking with Marcele Reola about Italian folk magic and intergenerational attachments. I'll skip the book update today, other than to remind you that you can read the first chapter of Daughter of the Mystic Moon for free on my website, and follow the Kickstarter page to be notified when it launches. Those links are in the show notes. Marcele Reola is a friend I met at the first Small Town Monsters Monster Fest in 2023. We quickly hit it off because we share a love of cryptids and other paranormal topics, an affinity for helping others, and a similar cultural heritage, although she's much closer to her Italian roots than I am. So, without further ado, let's dive in with Marcele. Hi, Marcele. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much, Nikki. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you. I am so excited that you've come back on the show after being on it, a little over a year, or not quite a year ago. Time flies when you're having fun.
It does. It does. It actually almost was a year ago because it was right. It was in July. I remember
Hmm.
because my mom passed in July. So, and then we were. When was the last time I probably saw you? Was June? Was that when Monster
Yeah.
Rest was?
Monster Fest 2 or Monster Fest, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we did the recap with our little gang on I forgot to look up the episode number, but one of those episodes last year.
The best one ever.
The best one. Honestly, it's been the most popular one since I
Oh,
restarted the podcast.
oh, wow.
So, yeah, it blows my
That's
mind. People wanted
hilarious.
to hear us talk about it, but I think a
Yeah.
lot of people who went just wanted
Uh-huh.
to relive their experience.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so you are
Absolutely.
back
I'm
and
back.
you're going to educate me tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to try to. Everything that I've found out about like Italian folk practices or folk medicine has been, it's always been there per se. It's kind of like Nikki, you were saying earlier about the table tipping and, but shh, we don't talk about that type of a thing.
Hmm.
Um, that's kind of, I mean, I feel in general with the things that I'm talking about tonight is that a lot of it is kind of like you don't talk about it in some ways because in some ways, like that's Italian Americans, I'm Italian American and Sicilian American. And a lot of this is based in Italian American from my experiences, but there's also some experiences and influences that I happen to pick up along the way. But um, so where I grew up in West Mifflin, which is a very, oh boy, it's your very stereotypical, steel town suburb. I grew up
Hmm.
in the steel boom in the 80s, one of the first, suburbs. But the way that Pittsburgh, kind of lies, like the way that it's laid out is that there's the city and then there's your suburbs, but then your suburbs in Pittsburgh for some reason, and I don't know if this is in a lot of other places, like once you're in those suburbs, very few people cross the bridges to go back to the city, so to
Yeah.
speak. And then there was a lot of different like where in West Mifflin, where I grew up, there was there was a couple of Italian Americans, but definitely not like there were other places where there were actually enclaves of Italian Americans. And that was in like the Bloomfield area of Pittsburgh, which was in the city, and then
Mhm.
Penn Hills, which was a suburb. Um, and then there was Monroeville. So it was kind of like because on top of that, and then being in a place where it almost felt unsafe to talk about these things, or neighbors would look at you side-eyed, or they would just wouldn't get it. Um, I found solace, and my family found solace in a neighborhood called Hazelwood, which is where my family first settled. So yeah, and in Hazelwood, it was more like an enclave, but it had a lot of different nationalities. It's your very typical Pittsburgh kind of neighborhood where there's lots of different nationalities. We're all living up right against each other in these, like these row houses.
Yeah.
So everybody shared food, everybody shared stories, everybody shared just experiences. So, and whenever I would go to Hazelwood, which I spent a lot of time there, we spent every Sunday there after church. And then we would also, spend more time there during the summer and sleepovers and things like that when I was a kid. But whenever I would cross that bridge, it was really symbolic, and it almost felt magical because it was such a mystery to me like that. Like it was so interesting because it felt like I was connecting with this old world.
Hmm.
And at the same time, it seemed so far away physically. And then, like, oh, that was such a long time ago. But then there was still, I mean, and at that point, Hazelwood was pretty darn run down at the point that I started being able to have like memories of it. But it was like I was connecting those two worlds, like the old world and then the new world here in like the suburbs. So when I was in Hazelwood, that's kind of where I felt a lot of well, definitely my first experiences with um, the neighbor next door, right next door to us. There is something called, and this is how the Sicilian Americans in my family pronounce it, and I'm not 100% sure. This is just like we all Italian Americans, as I'm sure you know, we cut everything off. So it was called,
Yeah.
we do, we cut everything off. So it's like instead of bruschetta, it's bruschette, you know.
Yep.
And people like cringe at that, but it's true, and I cringed at it too after I like started educating myself on Italian language, and I started becoming snobby, and then I just realized like you're just an Italian American. Like this is your culture. This is your
Yeah.
culture. And it's distinctively different in a lot of ways than like Sicilian culture and Italian culture in that country. But some of those, beliefs, of course, did come over, with us. And the array and the different like diversity within, just being like Italian, like you think, oh, I'm Italian. But there were so many different little villages, and then so many different communes, and also different dialects. So, what you and your family may have known my family may not have known. And also, there was this story in my family where sometimes my mother, my grandmother, and my grandmother on my dad's side, they were very close, but they sometimes couldn't understand each other because they spoke different dialects.
Oh,
One
wow.
was the one was more Sicilian, and the other one was more Neapolitan. So, and then with that came like a lot of different beliefs, like it's in the table tipping thing that you were talking about. It's not the first time I've heard of it because I think we might have talked about it once before, maybe when we first met.
I think
But
so.
like I was like, oh, this is interesting. So of course I had to Google it and try to find out more information about it. Um, but yeah, it's I mean, it excites me. It really does. And I mean, it interests me. It's a personal thing. I've learned a lot, but a lot of it was a lot of like remembering and oh yeah, and that's what they do. Like going back to the first thing that I was talking about was the Maloik or the Malocchio, which is the evil eye,
Hmm.
and our family chopped it down to the Maloik. So such a funny little word, right? You're laughing. How can you not?
I
The Maloik. Like,
I
oh,
know,
the monster.
right?
Doesn't it? And it's like, I mean, you were just like, oh my. What was scary about it was, first of all, you didn't know how you got it. And secondly, you could give it to anybody by just existing. So it's really it's hilarious, but it's also very and how much that like saturates that culture and like
Mhm,
saturates how I grew up. It's amazing. It's just amazing. And side note, I've kind of like tried to pull this apart with my therapist. I'm like, oh, I get this now. I get why I act the way that I do, or that I'm guarded, and things like that, because a lot of it was you were protecting your family,
mhm.
and you were protecting those traditions.
Yeah,
And the tradition of being able to, the Maloik in general, the evil eye was, if you could, I could give it to you by saying, "Oh my God, I love your hair," or "I love your necklace," or anything like that, and you don't mean it to be intentional. It's just that from that compliment, there's this, obviously, I don't have that jewelry. Obviously, I don't have that hair. I like yours. I'm complimenting on you, but I have less of something. So I want that, secretly want that.
yeah,
So it kind of creates this, like, I don't know. It's kind of, it's a negative thing, right? Like it
yeah.
doesn't.
It's envy.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And that's, you know, being Catholic, that's a sin.
Yeah,
You know, it's a big one for sure. But the first time like I ever experienced a healing of the Maloik was when I was in Hazelwood, and my grandma's next door neighbor, her name was Malin, couldn't speak anything that I could understand. And I don't think my grandmother understood her, but she would perform these rituals on her front porch, and people would come to see her, and you did not make eye contact with her.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, she was, this lady Malin, was, I guess she was considered like the witch almost in some ways. And it was like I remember getting out of the car and going into my grandmother's house, and Malin would always try to talk to me, and I did not want to look at her because she scared me. But what she did, she like scared the heck out of me, and she would talk to me and then laugh, and I was like, oh my God, I have no clue what you're saying. But she was the official Hazelwood healer, really, is what she was. She was, people would show up at her house complaining about something, usually a headache, sometimes just feeling really tired, exhausted. And then she would perform this ritual on them, which involved a bowl of water and olive oil. So, yeah, exactly. So she would, I can't, I have different memories of it because I have influences from things that I've read about. Some people will say that, like, you, you put a towel over your head, and then they drop the olive oil in the water, and the symbols that it makes, that you interpret them, but that the healer or the witch or my
Yeah.
neighbor Lynn interpreted them. And then she would, the next thing she would do is she would take that, from my memory, she would take the cloth and she would put it on top of the head. And I witnessed this with my sister because my sister was always getting bad headaches. And then she would anoint her with the olive oil, and then she would like give her an assignment, say some prayers over her, tell her to go home and say some prayers. And, within minutes, my sister's headache was gone. Now, I
Mhm.
don't know if that was because, the steaming olive oil with
The
the
towel over your head.
towel over her head could have helped a lot because she's definitely has sinus issues. But it was always this belief of, yeah, you have a headache, but you don't really have a headache. Something else is underlying than your
Yeah.
headache. There's something else going on. Somebody complimented you. Somebody gave you, the evil eye. And so therefore, like all of your ailments that you had stomachache or whatnot were related to this evil eye. So instead of like in this neighborhood in particular, and with the generations of the first people that came here in my family and neighborhood, it was like, you're not sick, you don't have a stomachache, you don't have a headache, somebody has put something on you. The maloikia, which is, I guess, the correct pronunciation
Yeah.
of it. And so yeah, um, so that was kind of one of my very first experiences recognizing, like, oh, my family's not really like other people, or what are they doing? Like, this is weird. But it was also something that, like, we kept very close to our hearts,
Hmm.
and something that we didn't talk about with people outside of the community because, like I said, they would think that you were nuts, or they would just think that you were weird, and it just didn't feel safe. And unless you talk to another Italian American, they wouldn't quite get it or understand it. And there's so many different versions of it, so many different ways to different, you know, ways of healing it per se and protecting yourself against it. In Italian, traditional Italian American and Italian folk magic, it's always protection.
Hmm.
So of course you have your protection of your um, we called it in our dialect quinigit, which is quinicolio, which is the pepper, little pepper, the little horn.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that before. I'm sure you have, but
Yep.
that's something that you would wear that, and that was supposed to protect you from the evil eye. And then also you would wear the mano, which was a hand making a certain gesture that looked like, a combination of the penis entering the vagina, the fist, it was called also, and that was also to protect you as well. So that was something that you were never allowed to buy for yourself.
Hmm.
That was something that you had to be given from somebody. So, yeah, so that was the weirdest, not the weirdest, but that was kind of like the underlying, you know, oh, this is a little bit different than, you know, what my neighbor Kristen Balazanis is doing up the street.
Now, because I grew up far enough away from the Italian side of my family that I did not get to experience any of this. But I heard stories from my dad.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering some of the logistics. Like, did did you pay for her help? Did you bring her food? Did like, was there any payment, or did you just knock on the door and say, "I have a headache. Can you fix me, please?"
It was basically, I mean, everybody shared food. So it was just, it was part of the community. It was the way,
That's
so
awesome.
yeah, it just, that was the way. That's kind of like how a lot of it in these practices, I like when I first started like pulling things apart, and people would call it Italian folk magic, or, you know, witchcraft or whatever. A lot of it was just like, oh, I didn't realize it had this label. This is just the way. This is the way of being. Just kind of like, in just a different form of indigenous,
Hmm.
spirituality or indigenous beliefs, a different group of indigenous folks that, not like Native American indigenous, obviously, but like groups of people who had these traditions and ways of being. And it was exchanging food, and your neighbor would do this, thing with the olive oil and get rid of your headache. And then also, get rid of your stomach ache or whatever ailment that you might have. And then, so there was never any exchange of money. As far as like, I know it was always exchange of just like, you know, this is what we do. This is what we
Yeah,
do for each other.
it's just part of the community.
It's just part of the community. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so cool.
It is very, very cool. It
How old,
is.
how old were you when you lived there?
Um,
Like,
well, I didn't live in Hazelwood, but we spent a ton of time
when you were
in
there?
Hazelwood. Yeah, I mean, the first memory I have from being there was probably like 3 or 4,
Okay.
maybe. And it's interesting too, because getting back to that whole bridges thing, it was always this story too, because we'd go over the Glenwood Bridge, and according to my dad, there was a plane that mysteriously crashed into the water. I believe it was the Monongahela River, and they never found it, and they never found the survivors of it. So that was kind of like an almost like my family is very, folky and mysterious in some ways, and especially on my dad's side, because I mean my mom's side too, but I just feel like with my dad's side, because his dad was from Sicily, like my mom's family, they were a little bit more like Americanized, so to
Hmm.
speak. Um, so it just always felt like as soon as we crossed that bridge, like I was going into a different time and place. Always. Always. And just because, things weren't there that used to be there, and that they would mention that to me, and that our church, St. Stephen's Church, was a big Catholic church there. And that would be like a family reunion for us. Like we would go there, like maybe once or twice a month. We had a different church in West Mifflin for our regular Sundays. But then when we were going to church in Hazelwood, that was really special because then you would run into your cousins, and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, it was just something, like I said, it's just something that I grew up on, and it never seemed like, oh, this is different until I realized that it was different.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things that like I've been learning that I know this is something that we wanted to talk about, the intergenerational attachments.
Yes.
That, like I had no idea. I didn't really have the words, the vocabulary to put what was happening to it. So I went to Sicily a few years ago with this group. They were called Radici Siciliano, and it's a group that their whole idea is to go into these places but not be tourist, so to speak. And
Hmm.
then they kind of hook you up with teachers and artists and musicians like from the area, and it's not your typical travel experience. Like in it, you do get to see some things. But we went to Palermo, and I met this. So Mary Beth Bonfiglio is the founder of, and her and a couple of other people were the founders of Radici Siciliano. And so she had set up this immersion, which it was called Nymphe, which is an introduction to the nymphs, the sirens, the mermaids, the water witches, that type thing, and how that the Nymphe always existed in this kind of limited space, and kind of like the island itself of Sicily it's alive. They consider it to be alive. They consider it to be like, I mean, it's this magical, they call it the Saint Etna Mama Schiavone, which God help me if I pronounced that wrong. I'm sure I did. Schiavone, I don't know. Sorry, Mary Beth Bonfiglio. but But yeah, so I just kind of I stumbled into this, and I really had no idea that this idea of intergenerational attachment existed until I was at dinner one night with this group, and Mary Beth was talking about how she was going to, like, part of her, you know, kind of, um, vision with these trips are that she very much has become part of the community again.
Cool.
And she's trying to get us to be Italian Americans. You don't have to be Italian though, but or Sicilian. She's just like trying to get you reunited really with your roots and to become part of the community again and part of these practices that we call the way, you know. So, which some of these practices included, and I can get into that in a little bit, but like drumming and dancing, but she was talking particularly about having an intergenerational attachment, which followed her and her daughter and then her father, and have been in her family for years. And she was explaining it to me as, sometimes the attachment will be out of balance, and it'll show up in certain ways of illness, for example. So her daughter was getting really, really ill and getting these bad stomach aches. So they took her on an offshoot one of the days away from the rest of the group. They took her to see a healer who specifically dealt with attachments. And it wasn't to remove the attachments, it was more or less to appease the attachments and figure out what's going on. Like, why are you so upset with me? What do you need? So she actually learned, and her daughter, and she's still in practice of this, and this attachments, it follows her from place to place. It's not just like it follows her to Sicily, it follows her to her house. I mean, it's part of her family. It's been passed down,
Hmm.
almost like, intergenerationally, it's been passed down. This, I mean, I guess you could call it a spirit guide in some way, but like, it's not always your like fun, like, I'm your magical fairy godmother.
Right.
It's sometimes it's like it gets nasty. Sometimes it doesn't like, what you're doing in your house. It doesn't like what you're eating, and it's gonna like rear its ugly head. So you kind of have to, almost, she speaks to it, or she speaks to this entity, or whatever you want to call it, this attachment, and kind of asks what it needs. And it could need anything from, oh, you forgot about me. I've been here. Talk about me, to like, why don't you light a candle over here, or light a candle to, Saint Rosalia or something. It's time, or clean up your area because I'm feeling very stagnant. So, this is something that she's experienced, her daughter has experienced, and her father has experienced. And although we didn't get much, into a lot of the details because we were all eating dinner, but she was going that very next day to go get, and they call it worms. She was getting the worms. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I have not.
Yeah, I thought it was like pinworms, but they're actually like they call getting the worms out of you. And there's like a certain ritual, a certain prayer, which I know nothing about, but it's a Sicilian ritual where they would go and they would, try to remove these worms. And these worms were supposed to be related to either this attachment or something else. And it could even be something that, extends from the evil eye, right?
Yeah.
Maybe somebody was jealous, or they're jealous of the family. And that could be something that is, jealousy. And with my family, it became something that was attached to my mom's side, actually. And that has been kind of passed down. And that we've all tried to, like, specifically, like my sister and myself, I have four, wait a minute, three sisters and a brother, and some of us are more receptive to it than others. Like, for example, my sister Lisa, um, has always had the ability to be able to recognize energy, or, go into a place and be able to feel energy. So she's definitely had experiences with this attachment where she's gone into conversations with them, not sure really what they wanted from her. And as that result, she became very, very like devoutly Christian, and kind of shut that part of herself down
Mm.
as a result. But she's still, her and I are very connected. She's my oldest sister and I'm the youngest. Where as soon as she realizes, like, she gets a feeling, and her feeling is she knows that there's something wrong with me. I'm depressed, I'm down, there's something off. And then I'll get a text from her. So that's something that was very prominent, in my family as well. This attachment, I really can't, it's kind of hard to explain because, like I said, I didn't really have words for it.
Hmm.
Was this something that was a curse? Was this something that was passed down? It was believed to be passed down to my mom from her, and this is odd, from my aunt, but not my aunt on my mom's side. It was my aunt on my dad's side, because um, she had a lot of abilities herself, and she practiced a lot of different things that this curse was kind of put on my mother, and this attachment was kind of put on my mother. And then my mother was kind of seen as this, um, person that brought bad luck to the family.
That's not fair.
No, not at all. Because my mom, and really when you think about it, and I was joking around with you in a text about this is generational trauma and generational attachment, and it really is trauma too, at the same time, because like a lot of this does come with trauma. I mean, and a lot of it is attracted to trauma as a
Yeah.
result. And when you're in those places of depression or in those places, you're in a bad spot, you're very vulnerable. And
Yeah.
so you don't know what you're getting, but these particular entities or entity or attachment or whatever you want to call it was something that definitely affected my mom. And, we would look at it in modern times and we'd be like, oh, she was just depressed or, oh, she was suffering from, like a mental breakdown or something. But it was something. And, I believe it's both. To be honest with you, I don't think it has to be either or. I think it can be both.
Hmm.
And I think it's just something where you kind of have to learn to become friends with your demons in some way. And I'm not saying they were demons in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Do not think that they were. I just think that they were either attachments of like old family members, unresolved issues, messages that tried to get across. And they would always kind of just show up to people that were very receptive or very vulnerable or very emotional, being, myself, my sister Lisa, and my mom
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And th- there's so much to this and so much to unpack. So, when I first started practicing the emotion code, I looked into, and the words escaping me, it might be epigenetics, but how trauma can be passed down through the family. And um, there have been studies about it. So, like
Mhm,
people who say were in Italy 100 years ago, and the people that generation suffered from extreme famine, and they
mhm,
were constantly wondering where their next meal was coming from. And when you're
right,
starving, you're a little food obsessed because you need food, you need nourishment. Um, those people in their DNA captured this trauma, and it comes down through the DNA, so that when I am releasing trapped emotions, if I'm releasing an inherited trapped emotion, it could be related to that happened 100 years ago
mhm,
to, 3, 4 generations back. And the person who's experiencing the physical effects of these trapped emotions, that they didn't experience the famine themselves, but it's come down through their DNA. And that's why some people have certain obsessions, like they come down through their family. Like my family
yeah,
is food obsessed. Like the Italian side of my family, it's
yes,
you're eating
yeah,
breakfast and you're already planning lunch and dinner.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
I thought that was normal. And then, dating somebody who does not come from an Italian family, they're like,
mhm,
why are you always thinking about food? And I'm
yep,
like, are we not supposed to? You know, like I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I mean, it really does. I would joke with my mom that she used to make World War II coffee, and it was terrible. It was terrible, and it tasted like crap. And it's because it was World War II coffee. It was the coffee. It wasn't that, same brand or, she just learned to make coffee in a way where it was very much like, kind of use as little as possible. And I just remember like drinking it all the time and like, ugh, like this is gross, but I drank it. But I drank it, and she'd be like, put some sugar in it, put some sugar in
Yeah.
it. And that kind of changed things. But I mean, it is. It's amazing. I mean, and I love that topic, and we could probably do. We could stay on that for hours. I mean, honestly, because I do believe that there's a lot of truth in that. And I mean, I have a background in social services and psychology and working with children that were abused, and when you just begin to pull apart these strings, you know, and how they're all kind of connected. And you don't sometimes even realize, like, oh, why am I that way? Like, why am I so automatically standoffish? But I
Hmm.
pushed my way out of that because I try to get beyond that. Like, I automatically feel like when I go into a room, I start to put up my shield, right?
Yep.
And that's for energy too, to
Yeah.
protect my energy. But it's also like the way that I grew up, do not trust outside your family. So that was very, when you start to reveal things to people that aren't in your family or reveal things to people that aren't in that culture, and then the way that they react to you is kind of like, then you start to question, like, what the hell?
Right.
But then you realize that this is a lot of it, it's all connected. It's connected to the famine. Why did so many people leave southern Italy? Why did so many people leave Sicily? And I mean, they were starving,
Hmm.
starving to death.
Yeah.
And so there is that need. There is always, I make too much food. I have a family of three at home, but I always freaking make too much food, especially when it comes to pasta. You know,
Uh-huh.
I'm always gonna make more than I need. And then I'm like, why did I make this? you know
Yeah. Yeah.
but
My dad's side of the family does the same thing. They make enough for 20 people when there are four sitting down for dinner.
exactly, right. Well, I mean, at least you'll have it. You'll have leftovers for days. You might be sick of pasta, but hey, you've got
Right.
food.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's once you start to learn about this stuff and it starts to make so much sense to those things that are normal to your family that don't quite seem so normal to outsiders. Um, and I love it because, when you're working on healing,
Hmm.
you can you can heal more than just the person that you're working with. You can heal the past and the present generations in their family that are affected by the same thing. And so because of that, when you're talking about an intergenerational attachment,
Hmm.
my brain is saying, has anybody tried to remove this? Like, is that something that it would even come to mind for your family?
Well, I think at this point, everybody would think that I'm nuts, which I already am, and everybody does within my family. So, but honestly, I am the only one because I've become so, because I've wanted to, like, I worked at a library, 16, 17, 18 years ago, and I stumbled across this book, and it was called, So How Long Have You Wanted to Be Italian? And it was the story, and I think her name is Anna Filomeno, Anna Filomeno or Anna Filomena. It was her experience as an Italian American and about like how she rediscovered her Italian American stuff. Because and anybody that comes from, not a dominant, I mean, it is a dominant culture now in the United States, but like it's a subculture in some ways. You want to assimilate. That was what it was all about,
Mm-hmm.
assimilating, which
Yeah.
resolved into, or excuse me, evolved into like losing these practices,
Mm-hmm.
losing your Italianness. And I think that that's why it's so important, the work that Mary Beth is doing, the work that other people are doing, to kind of bring back, and heal, like, because you are healing different generations. You're healing different. There's a museum actually in Sicily. I don't know specifically where, but there was a retreat there recently where, on one floor is all about Italian witchcraft and Italian folk magic, and they have a healer there, and he practices different herbalism. And then on the other floor, it's all about the experience of Sicilians moving to the United States. So it's all about this experience and how much it did leave a hole in their hearts as well, and how
Mm-hmm.
like us going back really is a healing for a lot of generations. And a lot of, I mean, I was watching a reel on, Instagram about like, the one woman who was the translator who I knew from when I went on my experience. She was just so overcome with like sorrow by looking at this, history, and then having this opportunity to reconnect these people that had no connections. So I mean, that's really moving to me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and you would think like, why is this young woman? she's in her 20s. Why does she give a shit about like these, people from America and who, basically ruined everything for everyone? I mean, maybe I didn't and you didn't, but you know what I mean? Like, if you
Yeah.
just have such a bad reputation and like, and then just that's an important part of her work, is to connect people back with their roots. And it's not even so much to about, once again, about like having to have Sicilian or Italian or Mediterranean roots. It's just about reconnecting with those parts that you've had to submerge, or reconnecting with those parts that you've had to assimilate. You've had to assimilate. So you lose, if you're Irish, there's a lot of Irish folk magic.
Hmm.
So many different things out there that are practices that are just the way for them, the way for that culture. And, we kind of just suppress that. And,
Yeah.
to be accepted, to assimilate, and what's interesting is that a lot of people view the Maloik as there's a belief that the Maloik is actually a symbolism of capitalism.
Huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's that, you always, there's never enough, which goes back to the poverty and to the, food. I need more food. There's never enough. I want, I want, I want. And so
Hmm.
there's this idea of, and you'll see like in the symbol of the eye. I don't know if you've seen the symbol. It's a
Yeah.
blue eye. And it's very striking. And they call it the evil, capitalistic eye, because of the fact that it just really symbolizes that, um, this is America. This is what America looks like. This is what, capitalism looks like. And you should assimilate to this as well.
Yeah. I'm writing myself a note to post a picture of the evil eye when
Yeah.
I post this podcast. We just had the Greek internet, or not international, the Greek festival um 2 weekends ago. And it's an annual thing in Raleigh, and it's put on by the biggest Greek Orthodox church here. And the evil eye is everywhere. When you go into the little market area, the food is
Mhm.
the biggest part of the festival. Like
Yeah.
that's why we go. We're not Greek, but the food is amazing.
Yeah.
And it's the church's big fundraiser. So
Mhm.
it's one of those things the entire city will go to because they've been doing it for decades. And you just know you're going to get amazing food, and then you can go look at the handcrafts and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, the evil eye is everywhere. So it's not just an Italian thing or a Sicilian thing,
Mhm.
it's a Mediterranean thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And um it's just neat to see that and how that's like expressed in throughout those different cultures, because there's so many, Turkey, it's just there's so many different interpretations, but there's like a lot of the same base meanings. But it's some crossovers, some not. But yeah, it's amazing. And like the more that I dig into this, I mean, I'm still learning. I have one of the very first books that I came across, which I would recommend. It's called Rue's Kitchen Witchery by Mary Grace Faroon. And it's called Italian Folk Magic. But it was one of the first books after that. So, How Long Have You Wanted to Be Italian book? That was kind of like a practice, like it would be, this is, and some of it, I would go through it and I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds familiar." And then other parts of it, I was like, "I have no idea what this person's talking about at all." So, I mean, it just goes to show you how, and of course, I just flipped onto the food, cooking, and eating page.
Of course.
And I mean, food is a ritual. Food it's a healing. It's a way to heal. It's a way to spread, your love and appreciation, and um, bringing it back to some of the magic. Whenever my mom would make sauce, she'd always stirring in good intentions, by
Yep.
stirring to the right, stirring back out bad intentions, to the left. She would pray over her sauce, say a couple Hail Marys in there, a couple Our Fathers. And then, I mean, if she didn't do it, the sauce didn't turn out as good. I swear it did not turn out as good. And even when I do that, I'm like, oh, this is so much better, you know? And when I like light a candle, or I put up a picture of my family, or I do some quote unquote ancestral veneration by, just in my kitchen, I feel more connected, and then I feel like their energy almost. And, knowing that like I might not know these things, like maybe some things were lost, but deep down I do know. And just to kind of like keep that in mind, like you're
Yeah.
connected, you're still connected. Um, but yeah, I would love I've done a lot of mm, uh, energy work. I've had people do energy work on me.
Hmm.
So as far as like removing the attachments are concerned, um, yeah, like I definitely feel like that's something that, I feel like that's something that would help for sure. Because I know it's helped me it definitely has. And it's also like finding out all this information has made me not so
Yeah.
afraid to like talk out loud to something or or say, hey, this does exist. I'm not crazy. This is not a curse per se. This is just something that, this is an attachment to this family and they're attached to it for a reason, and to try to, you could drive yourself nuts trying to figure out that reason, but also how do you live with that?
Right.
And you're right, like absolutely, you could live in a very suppressed way from it, or you can embrace it. And I'm trying to do that as much as I possibly can because otherwise it's just going to make you nuts.
You're right. That's the way. That's the way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and yeah, as you get older, or a lot of us get
Hmm.
older, especially those of us who do energy work, but we just realize like just to embrace your whole authentic self, and that includes the parts of your history and maybe your family's history that aren't so good. Like, and this is not part of my experience, but I was talking to somebody who started digging into her family tree, and she found out that somebody in her family had owned slaves, and she
Hmm.
was suddenly very embarrassed by that fact. But it's like, you didn't own the slaves,
Hmm.
like this is part of your family tree. Learn from that experience, and if you want more empathy, dig into what it was like to be on the other side of that
Yeah.
enslavement. um but like don't be embarrassed for who you are in the way that you can't control what family you were born into.
No.
So to walk around with a shadow over yourself because of the family that you were born into is not a healthy way to look at it, but to see what
No.
you can learn from it. Because for me, it always goes back to what can you learn from it?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that, I mean, those are all really good points. And, a lot of times the things that even like admitting that there was an attachment, admitting that there were certain things going on, with my mom and my family, I couldn't admit that to people. I could, that's something that, and I did, like, there was this underlying shame, this underlying, there's something wrong,
Mhm.
and there's nothing wrong. It's just, it's there, and it's just part of your history, and this is what it is. And like you said, what do you learn from it? How do you work with it? And what do you take? Like, what's your next? Like, what do you take from it? And it's still for me, it's I'm learning things, every day. Every day I wake up and I'm like, I try to remember my dreams because dreaming and dream symbolism is a big thing that I grew up with too. Like we had this book, I don't know if you guys had this or if you knew anybody that had this, but it was a book, and that if you would, there's dreams, and then you would go into the book, and then it would equate to a number, and then you would play that number. And
Oh,
if
I
you,
don't know that book.
oh my gosh, yeah, so it goes back to this, like I guess it was called Morphia, which I guess is Morpheus, Morpheus, the Greek god of
Of
dreams.
dreams.
But so that's kind of where it ties back to. But really, what it comes down to is it's this basic dream book that you look up. You have this dream about, spaghetti. Spaghetti equals one. And so and then, your mom is sitting next to you. Mom is two. And then, you drop the spaghetti on the floor. The accidents are three. And so you would play those numbers because those were supposed to be given to you from the dream world, and there's I mean it's I don't we don't have the book anymore. My sister, who went a little too Christian, I mean, she's an amazing person, I love her, but I know she was just doing things, I think, just out of fear and a lot. And she
Hmm.
found her comfort in that. I kind of went the other way. I'm not a Christian, but I also have kept my heart open and realized that there's, you have to keep yourself open to things and you have to face certain things too. But I'm not always the best at either. But I'm human. I'm little and I'm learning.
Yeah, we're all human. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, I love the idea of that book. I have a lot of dream interpretation and symbol interpretation books, but that is one I've never heard of, and now I'm gonna have to go find one.
I know, like, so I really, it's a Neapolitan, so Naples, like, that's where it kind of originated. And I remember having the book, and on the front of the book, it was a paper book, right? It was just like this book was made by people and passed on. It was just basically like Xerox and passed on. And on the front of it was a devil, like the very stereotypical red devil. And then there was all these numbers on it. So of course you don't want to freaking look at it, especially if you grew up Catholic. It scared
Right.
the hell out of me. I didn't want to touch it,
The book is
but my
evil.
exactly, exactly. So I mean that's the kind of, because it had that symbolism on it, but it's not so much about that, but it's just about like interpreting. And then, what do these numbers mean? This number, but it's kind of a little weird how it was all connected to like the lotto. Go play this number. And
Yeah.
which is really funny is that not a lot, I don't want to be stereotypical, but many Italian Americans ran numbers. And my family on my mom's side just happened to run numbers. So you could maybe see that connection there. Like,
Yeah.
you have this dream. This is what this means. 101 is going to hit tonight. you know?
Yep.
So I don't know. It's fun. It really is. There's so many different things. There's so much to like dig through, and there's so many connections, and you know, um, and different beliefs, and um, I don't know. It's just something that because when I came across that book in the library, and I started realizing that, oh, there's something else in here. Like there is something else, and I don't want to lose this, especially since, I'm 53, and, my mom passed away last year, my dad died years ago. And a lot of that culture and those memories, those things that, finding out about the Maloic, the dream interpretation, the worms, things like that. This is all word of mouth. A lot of it
Hmm.
isn't written down, but now it's beginning to, be written down, which is great, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's books and books out there I could recommend, and um, it's definitely something that excites me, obviously, because it's part of my culture. But I think it excites me on a bigger thing than just my culture because I think, I'm obviously really interested in the paranormal and healing and meditation and, the other. And so to me, this is just the other as well.
Hmm. It's the
Yeah,
other, but it came from your culture.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's your
Right.
your own personal other.
It is my own personal other.
I love that. Cool. I'm trying. So, all right.
I know I won all over a lot of stuff tonight.
You did, and I'm trying to think if there was anything that like struck me while you were talking that I didn't write down because I think we covered pretty much everything that I was going to ask about. Um, okay, so I didn't prepare you for this question, and you are welcome to not answer it. But when I interviewed Brian,
hmm
I think I remember him saying something about my wife has some stories and like paranormal stories. Do you have
hmm
anything you want to share? And you can say no
Yeah.
because I'm putting you on the spot.
No, no, no. I mean, so I believe just like ever since, I believe like I inherited whatever I inherited to be able to sense energies and whatever they are. And I distinctively remember, being at my house that I grew up in, and I would have visitations from this woman on a regular basis. and she would always be outside my window. And she would always be like, almost beckoning me, but she would want to talk to me. And I was, of course, I told my family this, and they didn't believe me. They're like, oh, you're just making that up. You're a kid. But she actually, I've never really quite figured out why she would come. You know, she was just hanging out on the street, Gina Drive in West Mifflin. I don't know, but to me, she had this like, she presented herself as having this beautiful red hair, long red hair, and she presented herself in a gown. And that's, kind of what I remember. In some ways, she scared me, of course,
Hmm.
because she was there. Like, what the hell is she doing in my front yard? You know, like, what does she want from me? And it definitely felt like she wanted something from me. She wanted to talk to me. She wanted to express herself. So also in that house, my daughter, my oldest daughter, who's now 25, she had the experience, and I did too as well, where my father, passed away when I was like 26, maybe. But and then when I moved back with my daughter as a single parent, and with my mom. And so she said that she remembers hearing the door open and then somebody coming up the steps, and she could see like they were like a very dark shadow, and she could see um, like where eyes would be, but it was just darker where eyes would be, and that the person or the being or whatever just popped in to check and then just left. And that was something that my dad would do, to all of us. He was a steel worker. He would work like swing shifts. And I remember like waiting up for him and hearing him come up the steps and like, checking on us. And then he would go to bed. So it's
Yeah.
something that was like almost like a repetitive thing,
Yeah.
like a memory or whatever. So that's something that for sure, like I didn't experience that experience directly, but it's something that, it's like, oh yeah, that's my dad.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, even I would also there would this is going to sound so off the wall, but I actually talked to somebody about this, and they kind of had a same experience. I had this fan in my house that was like up top, like that would, was like would blow, it was like our version of air conditioning because we couldn't afford it at the time.
Yeah.
That's another thing about Italian and Italian dads. They're always trying to like come up with some device, to do something. Really, just get the freaking air conditioning.
Yeah.
Seriously. But like I would look up and this fan was attached to my attic, and I would see another figure of another woman. And it was different from the woman that would appear out front to me, but it was still noticeably, her hair was up in a bun. It was more like I knew that it was from a different era, and she would just peer down at me. And once again, it was one of these things like, oh, like, what does she want from me? Like, why is she looking at me? And why is she only appearing in the fan?
Right. She knew how to keep cool.
Exactly. Was there some type of like, because the fan's spinning and maybe it's making this, like, and I'm imagining these things. But I actually talked to a woman who was a healer as well, who I had met a couple years ago, and she said that she used to have experience with fans as well. So I don't know if that's something that would be something interesting to look into. Like, is that because you're seeing things because the fan's moving so fast? Is it, what is it? But she
Or
said
the
that she
white.
has the white
Okay.
noise.
I was going to say the
Yeah.
white noise could
Hmm.
lull you into a sense of relaxation, so you're more likely to be able to experience something,
Right.
maybe. Okay, back to the lady in the white gown. When you
Hmm.
say gown, are you talking like nightgown, wedding gown, just random dress?
To me, it almost looked like, um, I guess it would be like a celebration. It wasn't quite like it was a dress, like dressy dress kind of a thing, but it wasn't a wedding dress.
Like a ball gown or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. But it's interesting though because I do remember having conversations with her, and she, and this became connected to a dream that I had later on in life. She would always say to me, "You're the one with the blood." And I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? I'm a
Right.
vampire?
Are you a
Are
vampire?
you are you trying to get me? Like,
Maybe that's why she
honestly,
was outside. You
oh
weren't
my God,
inviting her in.
freaking true. Oh my God. Bitch.
Not
Just kidding, sorry. But yeah, so and then later on in life, I had this dream, which I remember very vividly, right before I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, where I was taken into this limousine, taken into this city that I'd never experienced before. And then a group of women were around me and they were saying, "You're the one with the blood. You're the one with the blood." So, of course, that scared the hell out of me.
right.
But, and I've learned to kind of like, what does that mean? So I've interpreted it as you're the one carrying the blood, you're the one with the DNA, like carrying that DNA. And then with after finding out that I was pregnant, after having that dream, I realized, there was a connection between my daughter and that dream. And she has a lot of abilities. And in her dad's side of the family, they're Koreans. He's Korean American, but they're from Korea. There's a lot of shamanism in that side of the family, which, I didn't even realize that that existed as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I just think there's a lot of like links to this is your blood, this is in your DNA, this is, there's nothing. It never, it was scary because like anybody that says you're the one with the blood is going to scare the hell out of you,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, that
especially,
sounds way
especially
creepier.
when you're little, right?
Right.
And, like how do you interpret that? And then telling my parents this and my sisters this, like they just thought I was nuts. They were just like, "You're nuts, you're making it up, you're nuts." Whether or not it was true, it was so vivid to me, and these conversations were happening telepathically,
Hmm.
but I could hear her. She just seemed so sad to me, so very lost, and just like I knew she didn't belong there,
Yeah.
but I knew that she wanted contact.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And by you're the one with the blood, it could just mean that you are open enough to be able to see her. And she's like, finally, somebody is seeing me.
exactly.
Although the phrasing is a little creepy.
Yeah,
Um, so has your daughter exhibited any abilities or like because I mean she's got your DNA and then
mhm.
she's got shamanism on the other side. Like,
She has a lot of dreams. She does a lot of dreams like that, or she'll have like a lot of symbolism. Like she will, um, she was in a relationship and the necklace that her girlfriend gave her broke. And then after it broke, then, they broke up kind of a thing. So
mhm.
there's a lot of symbolism for her. I think that shows up a lot. And her friends actually dream about me, which is, and friends that I've never met before.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's just, I mean, so I don't know. I don't know if it's just like this connection to other people that are, perceptive to that, and but this person that had that dream, or that I was involved in, she's also Asian as well. I mean, not that that has, but like some of her beliefs come from, there's a lot of dreaming beliefs in
Hmm.
symbolism in her culture as well.
Yeah.
So, and there's also actually in Italy, in Sicily, back to there is, and I went to this. It's the sanctuary of Saint Rosalia. And have you ever heard of Saint Rosalia?
No, I don't think
She
so.
she's amazing. Like she is the saint of. She was rich, of course. She was martyred, and they bricked her up in this church or in this mountain thing. But she is a um, what's the dream incubation. She does a lot with dream incubation, and so her remains are in this mountainside chapel in Sicily, and right outside of Palermo, and her remains are there, and she has Um, there's her symbolism is she has a skull. She always carries a skull. She has a skull with her, and then she has a rose coming out of her ear. And her, you know, ability, which led her to being martyred and then named a saint, was that she would have dreams and she would talk in dream incubations, be able to do that and then have these dreams and be able to speak directly to the Holy Spirit. And in this church, her remains are there, but also they open up this church hardly anymore to people that want to come in and do dream incubation, and they will let you sleep there. That happens very, very rarely. I really want to catch that at some point.
Yeah.
But they used to do it like a little bit more often. Of course, I don't even know, honestly, like time wise, the last time maybe that they had done that. But I did ask my friend with the connections in Sicily, like if that was something. And she was like, well, we can ask and see if that was something that they would let us do. But I don't know. I just, in dream incubation and dreaming and interpretation and symbolism has always been something too for me. So I loved your mini episode on symbolism. And I got a feather that night too. I was out in the woods that night too, and
What?
I got a feather. I did.
We both got a feather on the same day.
Exactly.
That's
I did.
amazing.
Yeah. I was on like a little horse trail in a local park. And then I was like, I'm just going to go through here and explore this, see where I go. And I ended up finding a feather. No, it wasn't as fancy as your feather. It was probably it was like a little black feather. But
Still cool.
I know I put it in my pocket, but now I don't know where it's at, of course.
I was gonna say you got the feather you needed, but
And then it's
it'll
gone.
it'll turn up.
It'll turn
It'll
out.
be fine.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
okay, so you're saying dream incubation, and that's a
Mhm.
term I've not heard of, which like you're introducing me to also at 51 and after being into this stuff for decades, you'd think I would have heard of everything by now. But no, you keep proving me wrong. I'm just kidding. There's no way I expect to know everything.
I mean, honestly, there is so much stuff out there, and unless you talk about it, you're not going to know about it, right?
Right.
And um, a lot of it's kept on the hush hush or buried or whatever. But that dream incubation is definitely when that kind of comes from, I guess, going back to, and I'm going to get this totally wrong, like the Greek goddesses that they would go to their whatever it was, their spring or their
Mhm.
hot. I was going to say hot tub. Their hot springs, their
I
hot tub.
mean, I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. And then they would, um, there was natural hot springs and people, there were seers there.
Yeah. The
Seers.
oracles.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. So a lot of that kind of, because Greece and Italy, especially Sicily, are so tied together.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, when you do your DNA, which I didn't do, my sister did the swap. Like you find, like you're Greek. Like if you're Sicilian or you're Southern Italian, your big part of you is Greek as well.
Yeah.
So there's lots of connections to that. But they did a lot of, so they a lot of the where they would bring, people would come in and speak to the oracles and the same thing with the Saint Rosalia. She was basically an oracle herself. So and that kind of, I've read a little bit about dream incubation and have often wanted to do that, but I think I kind of what I do usually at night is I light my forever glowing Saint um, Michael Archangel candle that I got from the Catholic store that never burns out because it's fake. It's an electric candle, and so then before I go to bed at night, I'll just say, I say some prayers of protection, and then I also just say, you know, um, I'm open to dreams.
Mhm.
If I want to talk to my mom shows up in my dreams all the time. She's always there. If I get upset about something or, I need to talk to her, she shows up in my dreams.
That's
So we
awesome.
have, yeah, we still have a pretty big connection. And yeah, and I'm always trying to learn from those dreams because that dream that I had so many years ago before I was pregnant with my daughter, that still is on my mind. Like that still, I really wish I could figure out exactly what it means. I can only interpret, right? You
Right.
know? and I could be like miscuing it and pushing it into something that it's really not, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So cool. We've covered a lot tonight.
I know. Holy
And
crap.
I'm so glad I finally got you on the podcast. It's my fault. I hadn't actually asked. I just assume if somebody wants to be on the podcast, they're going to tell me. And so,
Yeah.
listeners, if you want to be on the podcast, you have to tell me. Um, so,
Yeah,
but
absolutely. I appreciate your invite though, because I did, but I'm also kind of, when you asked me about like what my bio or introduction was, is I'm still discovering. I'm still discovering myself, my talents. I do healings. I've studied Reiki. I'm into this, Italian folk stuff too, into learning things, into, learning more about, connecting with the other worlds. So yeah, I mean, I love to talk about this stuff. We could talk for hours.
oh, we could, and we will, I'm sure,
Absolutely.
just not right now.
Absolutely. No, just not right now. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I love that you came on. Thank you. Thanks again to Marcelle for sharing her stories, and thank you for listening. You'll find links to some of the things Marcelle mentioned during our interview in the show notes. If you are interested in sharing your own paranormal experiences, or if you have an idea for an episode topic, please reach out through the contact form at peeppodcast.com. That's PEEP podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. While you're there, subscribe to my newsletter to keep up with the podcast and all my creative and energetic endeavors. I usually only email it once a month, although you may get 2 editions in July with the Kickstarter. You'll receive briefs on recent episodes, information on any upcoming appearances, plus some occasional fun extras. If you enjoy the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app. Share it with friends and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Ratings, reviews, and shares help platforms like Apple Podcast and Spotify know it's worthy of surfacing to new listeners. And as we build our audience, we have more chances to hear their paranormal stories. A huge thank you to everyone who has given the show some love. You're helping it grow. No matter how you support the show, listening, telling others about it, or any other way, I absolutely appreciate your being here. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe and be well.